you. Thank you very much indeed. What a great panel, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, John. Much appreciated. Incredible discussion. And we now have our final panel session being chaired by Eric Kilström. And can we ask our international contingent up? So we have Professor Kenji Shibuya, Tani Soshi, Julia, if you can come to the fore, Sam, and Daniel. Oh, sorry. Daniel, sorry.
Okay, well, I'm going to get rolling right away. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to question the distinguished panelists here. There's a couple of questions from each of your presentation that I'd like to pull out in today's conversation. And I'll start with you, Kenji, if I may, please. I had the pleasure of watching your YouTube video presentation of your first event here at King's, and you talked about you weren't afraid to start controversy. Here in the UK, the industrial strategy is really focused on healthy life expectancy. There's a growing gap between life expectancy and healthy life expectancy, and I was really struck by a comment that you had made in your presentation about driving change to healthy life expectancy, which we have defined as disability-free years. I'd really love to expand on the point that you made earlier, please.
Okay, so I think shifting from life expectancy just this for being alive to healthy life expectancy, or disability life expectancy is the way to go. And currently, Japanese government, particularly Ministry of Health, has set 2 goals: to extend healthy life expectancy and also reducing gaps in terms of health inequality, which is consistent with the UK government policy. But the problem is we see stagnated improvement in health life expectancy as well as widening gaps as opposed to our expectation. So we're pumping into money in terms of technologies, and also we have a bunch of set of plans, innovative white papers, but we are not getting there. So that's a problem. So we analyze carefully the usual cast of suspect study of risk factors. Of course, they do have some influence on in terms of differences in life expectancy across the prefectures or states, but not too much. So we suspect there should be something beyond that. And in my presentation, I show the stagnated effective coverage of blood pressure lowering drugs, antihypertensives. So 50% here is South London, 50% of hypertensive patients here in South London are not controlled, even though they are diagnosed. NHS is fantastic. They have great access, great GPs, but compliance is very low. But that figure has not changed actually for the past 2 decades. So we are trying to increase the compliance. For example, educating patients, empowering paramedics, or reducing the number of pills from 2, 3 to 1, or text reminder, or giving BP monitor to everyone to let them monitor themselves. I'm really suspicious about that kind of stuff. Giving all the responsibility to individuals, and once you give all the information to them, you change the behavior. So there's something we're missing here.
And we'll come back to that, Daniel. I'll bring you in on that conversation. But I'd like to go to Otani next, which we talked about the ecosystem and more than just the individual, the corporates. And in your presentation, you talked about corporate awards and getting the corporation involved. Can you expand on that? How do we support the individual to make those good decisions?
Okay. So basically, that is totally the vision of the companies. For example, the Laxing, like a healthy lunch free coupon, or health, or the overtime work management, And sometimes, so in case of the mining company, one of the mining company automated the process of the operation, which is good for the healthy of the employees. And one interesting case is like the one construction company tried to create cutting edge the office with all of IoT and AI technology to monitor everything in the office. And like humidity and temperature, carbon dioxide, that kind of thing. But they also monitor the noise and concentration of employees in the office, so that the employees are very, very anxious about how the company use that data in their management. So when the news was broadcasted, that company has that treatment turned into a huge headwind.
Right, very good. I'd like to go to you, Julia, next. Forgive me if I missed it, but in your life map, there was a big red circle.
That's right.
Did you talk to the red circle? Because for me, we're cutting new ground. Tana, you talked about going from 3 stages to multiple stages, and we don't have role models for this 100-year life. Today, here in the UK, we have 15,000 people who are over 100. There are 10 million in the UK today that can expect to live to 100. And they're thinking of the 3-stage model. What are we doing? What can we do for role models in this space? How do we fill that red circle?
That's right. I mean, that was really the point of that circle. When we did the analysis of the data and sort of the interesting points around the multi-stage life, very little analysis and understanding is actually in that top right-hand side of the graph. And so our job is to really address that. And as we were talking in the last panel around work, for example, the work that Yvonne is doing at Mercer in terms of the flexibility, looking at different ways one can zigzag in and out, really for the whole of life. Because we know we have to finance a longer life. And so with employers and businesses making it much easier to have that sort of zigzagging in and out fluidity, which will then flow through to those data points for this very long life that we're facing.
And I'm going to ask a bridging question. I'll ask you, Julia, then I'll bridge to yourself. The U.S. Has a very different approach to innovating in aging, much more corporate-led. What can we learn from Google or an Amazon? How are you engaging with the corporates, and what are the lessons learned there, if any, from your perspective?
I think generally one would say that the corporates are being quite slow to the table, quite slow to this discussion. And so we've seen some great examples from some discussions here, but it's actually a pretty slow process. The Centre on Longevity has a number of corporate advisors and advisory council, and that gets changed quite regularly as we bring in new voices. And we're able to actually use some of those companies as testing beds for our interventions. So particularly on the finance side, with companies like Fidelity, Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, those banks are being quite innovative in some of the ways they're trying to test out some of the ideas. But in terms of, you mentioned Amazon, Google, we put Stanford right alongside those organisations. It's, I would say it's very slow actually in terms of engaging. We invited some of those companies, tech companies, to come to the New Map of Life meeting, and there wasn't as much interest. We have to keep pushing and building those relationships, definitely. Because particularly on the multi-generational aspect of a lot of the products and services which are now being developed, we've touched on that. But it's vital to have every person's perspective at the table. I've been doing a bit of work with a wonderful person called Chip Conley in the US, who sold his hotel chain and then went to work for Airbnb. Really as a kind of sharer of wisdom, but also as a learner. He knew very little about the tech sector, but was going in there to share his global hospitality knowledge alongside a tech, hospitality platform. So I think we need to have those sort of examples. of sharing the perspectives, and it goes to the increased productivity, but also the cognitive diversity that we need in teams now to be able to generate the right products.
There's a lot of follow-up questions on that, which I'll come back to you on. Daniel, Switzerland is full of big corporates, the pharmaceutical industry and Nestle. Where do they play in your ecosystem of stakeholders? And are they driving innovation? Are they supporting what you're doing?
I mean, Switzerland does have these companies, but they are, of course, largely international. And it's a small amount that goes into Switzerland. They do support us, but they are not innovative. In Switzerland, I still believe the small-scale technical innovation, like watches, of course, or other gadgets, where Switzerland is extremely strong. But on these things, it's driven by university. And we do get financial support from Nestle in particular, and the pharmaceuticals. But it's always a fight for small amounts being a million or so.
Nutrition is quite important to healthy aging. I would imagine Nestle, nutraceuticals or other, at least it's small amounts, but where are they putting it?
They're putting it really in, like this Do Health project I showed, which is lots about nutrition. They put money in that. And of course, this is something we try to increase.
Tony, you talked about, Japan in general, I guess, is known for technology, particularly robotics. I was surprised not to see a robot in your presentation. Maybe you deliberately did that to diversify our understanding of what's happening, which there's a lot more going on. So, what is it that you can learn?
Actually, in the medical device, like robotics area, Japanese companies are doing well in the diagnostic equipment, but not good at the therapeutic devices. And this is reality, but again, for the healthy longevity perspective, so it depends that there are lots of the care demands, and the eyeball by Sony, the small entertainment robot with like the mechanic, the pet, and that is a huge failure for Sony at that time. But recently, the many caregivers that introduced the buy the eyeball to have a communication tool for elder people, and elder people actually are willing to communicate with an eyeball, and so that is not a tech-driven robotics, but more kind of emotional humanoid robot is have a potential in the Japanese country.
We're seeing them in a lot of corporate applications and hospitality and reception and there's much more sort of life approach, isn't there? Being incorporated into day to day. Kenji, I wanted to bring it back to what you're doing here in the UK. You have some very distinguished clients in the World Health Organization and the Japanese government. What can we learn here in the UK? Do you have aspirations to drive something that's happening here?
Yeah, UK is still the center of the universe in many aspects.
We think so.
That's why I'm here. Otherwise, I would go back. But this kind of discussion is really, really fascinating because UK, is not segregated from the rest of the world as Japan. The success of Japanese rugby team was bringing the talent and investing in it and harness it. So that's the beauty of what UK has been doing, bringing the talent from abroad and harness it and bringing it back, which is happening. Something into the opposite direction. But still, in terms of brain, in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of technology, in terms of speed, I think the UK is still leading. the rest of the world.
So what should we be implementing here? Is there a specific agenda that you have with the research center?
Yeah, but particularly UK's, for example, if you look at government green prevention, strong emphasis on genetics, but still talking about moving on the data-driven platform, NHS should be congratulated on their investment in NHS and also very innovative and bold movement on AI. So that kind of stuff Japan cannot do.
And I'd like to build on that data question. People in the room probably know it's one of my favorite subjects. And I take it back to one of the things that Public Health England had done. They ran a program, Changes for Health, and it was useful in getting information out, but how do you make it relevant and how do people action it? And we were talking about empowering people. And I think, there's a step further about contextualizing some of this data. It's one, Lord Filking talked about smoking, drinking, eating, but we know this, but we're not taking action on it. And a lot of times it's, well, I'm okay, but it doesn't really apply to me. And I think if there was more contextualizing.
Because it's about incentive. For example, take an example of his work later in the company, which is investing in personal activity for the employees. Before, Robin Bell, the budget CEOs here, most of them are working very hard. They see about the profit in the next phase before they're on board to approve his or her work. But that kind of mindset should be changed because they are promoting investing in personal activity will actually help the company for profit. They did a very nice study on evidence. And actually, they both from the US, Johnson & Johnson. They recognize this and investing in people's health will boost the profit. So that kind of change in mindset and also something similar to incentivize for their own. That will slightly change the scope.
And I want to bring it back to you, Daniel, in terms of the pharmaceutical industry. Someone talked about aging as a disease. In the U.S., I understand they're not treating it as a disease, more like treating a cluster of conditions as opposed. What's happening? Is there an effort on contextualizing some of this data?
I try to make a hint to that in the way we treat our data. And especially this study, the Do Health, where people over 70 are looked at from all angles. And this is what we think needs theoretical improvement, and that's where we see our strengths.
Trust is really the issue around data, isn't it? I mean, how do you handle data? You get people's trust and handle it in a safe way.
Part of it is that you try to keep the data, if it's personal data, as much as possible with the person. This is possible with the new developments, of course, and also the way we set up the studies. I think that's an important part, to have the people decide on their own data and then also become active in other ways, namely to say, this is important for me, which the investigator, who are usually younger people, don't really realize. So they bring not only the data, but their life experience. And this is how we try to approach this situation.
And Julia, you're going to have, again, a panel with the woman with the last word. So the last word, there's lots of data in U.S. companies. In your life map, what does data play in supporting the individual through their life journey?
Well, it's critical, I think, to have that, because it informs behavioural change, it informs decisions on investment, on where you want to work. And if you look at the investment also, employee engagement statistics, I think people are looking for a lot more from their employers in place of work. And so data is critical in terms of making those informed decisions. and actually being able to make it intelligible. And I think we've seen some good examples today in terms of how we're able to take that and then sort of crunch it and actually make it a very accessible form of information. And there's still work to do there, obviously, but I think it's vital.
Here in the UK, we've got the Centre for Data Ethics and work on data trust. I think there's some really good work to share on that. I could go on, but between you and lunch, and I'd rather have a happy audience. So please, thank you very much for the panel. Tina's going to do a wrap up, but thank you very much.